Hi everyone, my name is Lauren and I'm married to Andy, who's the minister at Harrogate Elim Church. I just want to take a short moment to share what God has been doing in my life over the last year. I hope this story encourages you and I hope it reminds you that God is a great God. Last year I started looking into stories of the Bible and a theme came apparent to me that I'd not noticed before. Quite often, before God does a great work of redemption, he begins with a barren woman. He begins with a time of great hopelessness. We have Sarah, who was married to Abraham, and God made a promise. She waited decades, and then children appeared. We have Rebecca, their daughter-in-law. She waited decades and later had children. Rachel, their granddaughter, again was barren. Her statement was, "Give me children lest I die." Others throughout the Old Testament, Manoah's wife, the mother of Samson, she was barren and had a similar prayer to Hannah. The New Testament, when God was about to do one of the greatest things he ever did, involved a woman named Elizabeth. She was past the years of bearing children and she'd given up hope, and God showed up. John the Baptist came on the scene. We find one more in the fellowship of the barren, if you will, Hannah. We see this incredible woman and her prayer to God, and we feel her pain. She paves the way for a son, and in this story, she gives us a way to process it. She processes her pain through prayer and ultimately arrives at a place of profound peace. You can find Hannah's story in 1 Samuel, and it talks about her going to the tabernacle to pray. She wasn't just praying a religious prayer on her knees with her arms folded. She was wrestling with God, so much so that Eli, who was at the tabernacle, accused her of being drunk. She was fighting emotions, pleading with God to give her children. I want to share with you today a part of that in my life. Me and Andy have been married 10 years. We celebrated our 10-year anniversary in lockdown in March. It wasn't quite the celebration we had planned, and the takeaway we ordered was 4 hours late. But you know what? Hallelujah. It was a great time anyway. In them 10 years, God has done amazing things. But more recently, God gave us Elsie. Elsie's our beautiful baby girl. She's almost 9 months old, and Elsie means consecrated to God. However, getting Elsie wasn't quite as simple as it could have been. Several years ago, me and Andy were told we couldn't have children. We'd gone to the doctor thinking I was pregnant and actually come back negative. They called us back in, and on the 2nd of December, several years ago, at 11:10, I remember what I was wearing, the doctor sat us down and told us, medically, we would not have children. Me and Andy were not compatible in that way. My heart broke. I was numb. I felt emotion sometimes about it, other times I just stung. And for years we battled with what God was doing. We actually had hope that God would do something. We thought we would have children. We had received prophecies that we would have children. One person in particular, if you're watching, thank you for stepping out. I received a message on Facebook from a friend that came to Regents with us. She was several years below us. And she messaged me one time before we found out we couldn't have children to say, "I have seen you and Andy on stage at Regents showing a baby scan photo with your faces full of glee." That message was sent before we even knew we couldn't have children, and during the process of finding out and afterwards became a real token solid hope moment for us. We kept referring back to that when we felt lost, when we felt broken, and God healed our hearts through that bit by bit. When we moved to Harrogate in 2018, we met with a couple here who sat down with us, completely unrelated to the church, and just wanted to meet us for coffee to find out what we were about. They asked if they could pray with us before we left, and of course we said yes, we'll take all the prayer in the world. We hadn't at this point told many people that we were not able to have children. We had failed IVF twice for various reasons. And before they started praying, the lady told us that we would be pregnant before the end of 2018. To be honest, I was angry. I was actually a little bit annoyed that she had made that declaration. We had been waiting years for children, and for someone to go ahead so blatantly and say, before the end of the year, you will have children. I was actually hurt. It created a open wound, I suppose, of something I thought I had let down, that I'd put down. I'd left it up to God. It got to the end of the year and I still wasn't pregnant. We started then thinking maybe it wasn't the calendar year, maybe it was the Jewish year, or maybe it was a year from when she told us that, or maybe it was, I don't know. We just wanted for that to be fulfilled. The new year began, and the first week of January I took a pregnancy test and it was positive. She was right. Before the end of 2018 I had fallen pregnant, and God had fulfilled a promise that he had given us years and years before. We had exhausted what the medics had said, and God turned up. You know, I had put it down time and time again. It became a daily thing in them years of waiting for me to lay it down at God's feet and give it to him. If not, God's still good became a mantra in my life. And some days I was declaring it out of complete faith, out of complete hope, and some days I was declaring it out of a desperation. If not, God, you are still mighty. And you know what? Hannah had the same prayer in the Bible. If not, you're good, God, but please, and she begged, just like we begged. And you know what? Our God is a good God. Our God knows the desires of our hearts. And in this case, God fulfilled them desires in my life and in my husband's life. And we now have a very beautiful, cheeky baby girl. Lockdown looks completely different to what we thought it would a year ago. The binging Netflix and eating snacks and chilling is definitely not what our lockdown looks like. But you know what? I wouldn't have it any other way. So I want to encourage you, if you are wrestling with God over a matter, the people in the Bible, just like in Hannah's story, were not these magical beings that trusted God with everything and left it up to him with a positive faith that carried them every day. Some of these guys struggled with things and they wrestled and shouted, so much so that they were accused of being drunk. But yet, you know what? They went back to God and they gave it to him and they laid it down and they didn't pick it back up. And that is exactly what we need to do. So if you are facing anything today that you need to lay down and keep it laid down at God's feet, then I encourage you to do so, because you never know what your life will look like this time next year because of God's goodness and miracles. Thank you.